What are the 10 emptiest stadiums in English football? That's what we're going to be looking at in today's video. England is undoubtedly home to some of the biggest football clubs in world football and some of the most passionate fan bases, even as far down as the National League. While English football is steeped in history and plenty of grounds are packed out week in, week out, that's not the case for every club up and down the country. For today's video, I've gathered the 10 emptiest stadium based on how full each ground has been during this season so far. If you'd like to see more attendance and stadium-based videos, then do drop a like on today's video. But without any further ado, let's just jump in. Ranked as the 10th emptiest stadium in the EFL, it's Highbury Stadium, home of Fleetwood Town, which on average this season has been just over 50% full, with an overall capacity of 50.2% this season, based on their average attendances in League Two. Now, in the case of Fleetwood, quite a lot of context is worth taking into consideration. The club were playing non-league football as recent as 2012, and since that point, they've done really well to establish themselves as an EFL side, bouncing between League Two and having a period in League One as well. Since that point, average gates have hovered at around about the 2,600 mark, which is what they've been so far this season. And when you take into consideration that Fleetwood itself is a small seaside town with an overall population of just over 25,000, their average gates aren't really to be sniffed at. You've also got to consider there's quite a few rival clubs around Fleetwood that will be sucking fans away from that side. You've got Blackpool right on their doorstep, Preston's not too far, Burnley and Blackburn either. For the size of the club, they do have quite a decent stadium that holds just over 5,300, but based on attendances this season, it has been the 10th emptiest ground in the EFL. Coming in as the 9th emptiest stadium in England, we've got the completely Suzuki Stadium, home of Cheltenham Town, which based on attendance figures from this season has only been 49.6% full. Now, Cheltenham's attendances over these past couple of seasons have taken quite a significant hit, especially comparing their numbers that they're getting in League Two at the moment compared to the crowds they were bringing in League One previously. So far this season, their average gates have hovered at around about that 3,500 mark, whereas a few years ago in League One, they were getting crowds of over 4,600 on average. That's quite a considerable drop off, and when you consider the ground overall holds just over 7,000 fans, you are left with quite a few vacant spaces. In the wider context of Cheltenham, you could probably make the argument that UK-wide, that region of the world is more famous for horse racing than it is football, but the fan base they do have is still very passionate. But like we were mentioning before with Fleetwood, you've also got a few other big clubs on their doorstep which will be taking fans away from that club. You've got the likes of Aston Villa and Wolves, which are only a short train ride away. The 8th emptiest stadium in England this season has been the Esso Legal Stadium, home of Barrow AFC, which on average has been just under 50% full, 49.1% full to be exact. Now, Barrow are really tucked away from the rest of the country. And with a population of just over 67,000, it's not a huge surprise that the club isn't bringing in masses of crowds, especially when you consider where their roots are and where they've come from in recent years to get to League Two. Still a stadium that I myself am waiting to tick off. I don't live too far away from Barrow, to be fair. Preston to Barrow, what's that? Probably an hour and a half drive, something like that. For the size of the club, they have done very well in recent years to get to where they are. It's just a question of whether or not they can expand that fan base to push them on even further. The 7th emptiest ground in English football is Ewood Park, home of Blackburn Rovers, which has only been 46.9% full on average this season. Blackburn are without doubt the biggest club we're going to speak about in today's video. Premier League champion as recent as 1995, a Premier League regular throughout the mid-2000s, but certainly a club that's fallen on harder times recently. Since the Venky's takeover in 2010, it's been a bit of a downward spiral since that point, and attendance figures have seriously dropped off since their relegation from the Premier League. Now, to be fair to Blackburn, in the 5 or so seasons since COVID, the year that was played behind closed doors, the average attendance figures at Ewood Park have gradually been creeping up, but this season's been a bit of a revert for them. On average last season they were getting gates of just over 16,100, but based on the quite small sample size of matches that we've had at Ewood Park so far this season, they've only been bringing in gates of just over 14,700 on average. That could go up and balance out as the season goes on, but as things stand, Ewood Park has been by far and away the emptiest ground in the Championship and the 7th emptiest in English football. Of course, a number of factors will play into this. Rising ticket prices being one of them. I believe Blackburn fans do pay some of the most expensive expensive prices compared to the other clubs in Lancashire, you know, certainly when comparing the likes of Preston, Burnley, Blackpool. You've got a fan base that's already a little bit disconnected with the club. That's the last thing you want to be doing, really. Worth remembering that while the club was playing in the Premier League, they were regularly getting crowds of over 22,000 on average. The sixth emptiest stadium in English football this season has been Prenton Park, home of Tranmere Rovers. Now, Tranmere faced a quite unique problem of having two Premier League giants on their doorstep, with both Liverpool and Everton in really close proximity to them. As that's the case, it's no wonder that a lot of youngsters who do grow up in that area naturally gravitate to one of the Premier League clubs. But Tranmere themselves definitely have a loyal supporter base, and attendances have remained fairly consistent throughout the years, regardless of what division they're in. They're currently playing in League 2. They have spent 7 of the last 8 years playing in League 2, and to be fair, attendances this season have taken a bit of a bump up as of late. So far this season, in their 5 home matches, they've had average gates of just over 7,300. If they manage to maintain that between now and the end of the season, it'll be the best supported year they've had since 2005. Prenton Park is a good stadium, it has to be said, holding just over 16,700. But like I say, with so much competition on your doorstep, no wonder their attendances aren't quite filling that out week in, week out. The 5th emptiest ground is Meadow Lane, home of Notts County, the oldest club on this entire list. Gates this season of just over 9,300 on average so far. That ground has only been filled 43.8% on average. Meadow Lane itself does have the capacity to hold over 21,000 fans when fully operational, but the club rarely tops out at over 10,000 these days. It's safe to say that the past decade or so has been very turbulent for Notts County, with relegations, ownership changes, and even a dip into non-league. Things have stabilised in recent years, and it feels like for that club to take the next step and really get some more fans on board, they'd need to be playing League 1 football maybe and take that next step as a club. Also, there's the elephant in the room that Nottingham, it's a big footballing city, but with 2 massive football clubs there, and Nottingham Forest do boast the bigger fan base. And in terms of proximity, there's barely anything to separate the 2 clubs. It's a walk from each stadium, just across the river and over the bridge. So I can't help but feel like there's a hell of a lot of potential there with Notts County, given all their history and location and things like that. But to attract those new fans, you need to be doing something right on the pitch, don't you? 4th emptiest stadium in English football is the Wham Stadium, home of Accrington Stanley, which on average this season has been filled just 43.6%. But Accrington Stanley certainly aren't a club to be sniffed at, and considering their size, really have punched above their weight in recent seasons. They had a good stint not too long ago playing in League 1 when they were really fighting against the elements given their budget and stature, but in more recent years have just about been keeping their head above water in League 2. This season they've had average gates of just over 2,300, which may seem quite small in comparison to a lot of the other clubs that we've spoken about on today's video, but when you consider that Accrington itself has a population of just over 34,000, that number's not to be sniffed at. I've always found Accrington as a really fun away day as well. I've done it a couple of times as a North End fan. Obviously, you're really open to the elements there in the away end, which isn't covered whatsoever, but I quite like it there at Accrington. But like I say, everything we've discussed, it's no surprise they do make an appearance on this video. Obviously, for clubs like that, the size of the travelling fans as well will also have quite a big implication on how big the gates are from week to week. The 3rd emptiest stadium in English football is Vale Park, home of Port Vale, which has been just 42.7% full this season. But dare I say it, I do think there are signs that things are picking up there at Port Vale, and for the future that the fan base is growing. So far this season they've had average gates of just over 8,000, and if they manage to maintain that between now and the end of the season, this will be their best supported campaign since 1997/98, which would be quite the achievement. Obviously, Vale Park is quite a big ground, all things considered, considering the average size of that fan base. It holds just shy of 19,000 fans. And over the last few years, they have made a bit of a name for themselves, Port Vale, as a bit of a yo-yo club between League 1 and League 2. But with the manner of their promotion last season, I've kept a bit of an eye on them this season in League 1 under Darren Moore as well. There's definitely an opportunity there for them to kick on and properly solidify themselves in the 3rd tier before then maybe going on and pushing on from that point onwards. Like I say, crowds there at Port Vale definitely are on the way up, but it's still the 3rd emptiest stadium in England. But this is the stage of the video where we take quite a big drop off. The second emptiest stadium in England is the Brick Community Stadium, home of Wigan Athletic, which on average in League One this season has been just 39.2% full on a match week. Now with Wigan Athletic and their crowds, there's quite a bit of context to be taken into consideration here. A club that was once a staple of the Premier League and won the FA Cup as recently as 2013, their attendances really have dwindled in recent seasons, and it's because of the club's instability off the pitch, which has been a leading contributing factor to that. Now even in their Premier League heyday, Wigan have never been the best supported club in the country. I don't think any Wigan fans pretends that they ever were that. You know, their attendances in the Premier League at their very peak were just over 20,000. So it's no surprise that those have pretty much been slashed in half since their relegation. When Wigan have been a championship club, attendances have tended to fluctuate anywhere from sort of low 12,000s to high 15,000s. But since their relegation to League One in 2023, attendances have taken even more of a hit. And over the last 3 seasons in League One, attendances have been on a bit of a downward spiral. So far this season, they've been getting average gates of just over 9,800, which is the lowest they've been at Wigan since 2015. Wigan fans, what do you think it'll take for your attendances to be boosted up again? Is it as simple as being promoted back to the Championship? Let me know. But this will come as a surprise to absolutely no one. The emptiest stadium in English football by quite some distance is Stadium MK, home of MK Dons, which on average this season has only been 24.5% filled, so less than a quarter of the ground is filled up on any given match week at Stadium MK. Now obviously it goes without saying their stadium is far too big for them. They've got a state-of-the-art modern ground which holds over 30,000 fans at full capacity, but for the size of the club they're absolutely nowhere near that. In the club's entire history they've only had 4 seasons where they've averaged gates of over 10,000 fans, and since being back in League 2 over these last few years, attendance figures have generally fluctuated from anywhere between 6,500 and 7,500. Obviously, it goes without saying that the history of MK Dons as a club is quite complex and controversial. Milton Keynes itself isn't exactly a city with deep footballing traditions, and having generally fluctuated between League 1 and League 2 throughout their entire history, it's no surprise that attendances haven't completely boomed at that club. You know, they had their chance at one point to maybe establish themselves as a championship club, but it just didn't quite happen. Based on the stats this season, it's been the emptiest ground in England. But there you have it, guys. That will wrap it up for today's video. If you did go to enjoy, make sure to drop a like, and if you'd like to see more regular content like this on the channel as well, do subscribe if you are new around here, but I'll see you all in the next one.